This is Art Sense, a podcast focused on educating and informing listeners about the past, present, and future of art. I'm Craig Gould. On today's episode, I speak with artist Joel Mesler about his artistic journey, his decades as an art dealer, his late blossoming art career, and his current exhibit, Pool Party, which is on exhibit through March 15th at levy-gorvy's galleries in both London and Palm Beach. And now my conversation with Joel Mesler. Joel Mesler, thank you so much for joining me today on the Art Sense podcast. Joel, a lot of times when I talk to artists, I like to start with a hypothetical, which is you're at a dinner party and you're seated next to somebody who has no idea who you are or what you do. How do you describe to them what you do?
Yeah, great first question. And I think this is probably the toughest question. Well, it's the first question, so it's the only question. So it's obviously the toughest question. But I guess I would say, you know, the story of Fiddler on the Roof?
Mm-hmm.
My paintings are kind of like that story. Like I guess all the highs and the lows and the journey of that. And I kind of tend to think of myself as like making little moments of Tevia's story a little bit.
Is it reflecting your own personal journey?
Yeah, I think that I have mined my own story because it's as you said earlier, it's what I know most of, and I'm not 100% confident I know much about anything else. The older I get, I realize I know absolutely nothing, but I kind of, I have this life lived of experiences, and so I kind of mind that, and I've kind of, from that have connected with other stories and kind of metaphors and analogies, and so I it's definitely like my work is, it's a story of like my trauma and all, the history and experience. But I think in it, there's sort of like a moment of awe, like the awe of life, and the gratitude of life that comes that, you realize like you're just a vessel at some point, and you kind of like, I think I really connect to that story of Tevye a little bit, where you just kind of like put your hands up and you're like, the life.
Right. It's funny. I talk with artists all the time and again, it's obvious that the best work is really personal and rooted in where they're from. It's like geographic, right? And so when I saw your alphabet paintings, my memory, my first thought goes to me having breakfast at the Polo Lounge at the Beverly-Hills Hotel. And, right. And I'm just wondering, you're from Beverly Hills. Was that a conscious decision? Were you mining something from your family, either consciously or subconsciously?
So, my parents, we lived in Beverly Hills, 600 block. My mom was always very proud to say, and as I was growing up, I think the like north of Sunset, south of Sunset kind of class system in Beverly Hills was, how big was your pool kind of conversation was omnipresent. And my parents, my father was a cardiologist with a real bad cocaine problem, and my mother had a desire of, I think not being just a soccer mom, and so their marriage didn't work out. And I think as things kind of fell apart, my parents' divorce kind of like, well, it did actually changed California law. They actually study it in divorce law, but it it changed kind of the course of, my, obviously my family's life and my brother and my life. And the Beverly Hills Hotel was this place that, we'd go there for brunch, like you said, at the Polo Lounge and stuff like that. But my father there was a couple of years where he had several nervous breakdowns in public. And the first one that I remember was actually at the Polo Lounge. And I remember him like picking up the table and like eggs Benedict like falling down like, the table and falling into my mother's lap, and him like getting up from the table, and kind of the scene, and everybody around like staring at us, and my mother, him running out, and my mother saying like, follow your father. And so, I'm like 11 years old and I'm following my father, and I remember the banana leaves of the wallpaper of the hotel. And I remember kind of like grinding my nails, digging them so deeply into the walls of the wallpaper that they like grinded into my cuticles, and so this kind of, as I've gotten older, like that wallpaper kind of always meant something very different to me than it did, obviously, had I not had that experience. And so, as I started making work again, as like this kind of older person, as a father, and, as somebody having hopefully dealt a little bit with my trauma, I look back at this time, and it, like this image of the wallpaper and this opulence and this luxury and this beauty, to me, underneath it holds this other kind of like sub story, and so I was able to kind of use that wallpaper as like this kind of like a sub story a little bit. And so I was able to kind of like find lots of meaning and almost like, to be honest, therapeutic, just kind of spending my time like thinking about that stuff, and making some shekels along the way. And so, I think that was the impetus of the wallpaper, is like it's kind of like multi-layered elements like that. And so it was, to answer your question, like a long-winded answer, but like it was very conscious to use that. And I think I've not only used that, but I've also kind of located other images and things like that represent or have been those kind of things throughout my life, where perhaps they can represent one thing, but also it's like almost an inside joke to yourself, like, oh, actually they mean this.
What other examples would you have in mind? Like,
to keep kind of like on that same like timeline, I almost say like, all my art for a while was like based on like this, the same few hours of my life. But when I was young, around the same time, there was a store called Huddle, and my parents, or my mother, my wallpaper in my bedroom and the furniture, the bookcases, the pillow spreads, the bed sheets, everything had the same like rainbow and like kind of faux car wheels and stuff like that. And they sold it at the store, in town. And not only did my brother and I have this, but every single other kid in my school and in the neighborhood had the same stuff. And so you would like have a sleepover at friends, and you're like, oh my God, I'm in my room still. And you'd go to another friend's, and they're like, same thing. You could not escape this wallpaper. And so, I've used kind of like these rainbows throughout my paintings, and it's like this, like, it could represent so many things. And to me, it's sort of like, it's like running from the rainbow.
That's interesting. It's funny you said that. I heard, I listened to a conversation that you had about your journey, and I believe Rainbow was the name of one of the people you ran into up in Sonoma State.
Oh, yeah.
Or maybe I'm substituting some other hippie name, but it sounded like
I was very close with. I had a friend Rainbow, and then I had a friend Summer and Tangerine. And Tangerine used to make me tea when I got sick, and we would make like a wormwood absinthe too. She was quite the healer.
I think it's worth just trying to quickly go through your timeline because, like, it's so unique. You start in Beverly Hills, but because of the historic divorce case and everything around that, you wind up going from one class level to the next and living out teenage debauchery, and then go on the move, kind of pulled by art. You leave LA to go to college at Sonoma State, and then how do things progress?
So I actually went to Sonoma State because I was planning on staying in Los Angeles and kind of selling ecstasy and quaaludes, but my I had big plans as a 17-year-old, and all my friends were going away to college, like Hampshire, and I went to school, nice liberal school, and I came home crying to my mother, 17-year-old kid, probably strung out on mushrooms or whatever. And I was like, Mom, Seth is going away to college and Matt's gone. And she goes, well, darling, I applied to Sonoma State University for you and you got accepted. And I couldn't believe it. My best friend from the year before, Dave Lake, had gone to Sonoma State and he loved it. And so my mom thought, well, that's the place. I'm going to apply for Joel because I know Joel better than Joel knows Joel. And she wrote my essay for me, and they loved my essay, and they accepted me, and I got in. And the major she put down for me was psychology. And I knew nothing about psychology, or, I didn't even know what, a psychologist was at this point. And yet it was my major. And I thanked her. I think I was appreciative for maybe all of, 2 hours. And I packed my car and I drove up to Sonoma, and I started taking psychology classes where I actually kind of loved reading about psychology. And I just slowly, from being in college, and I think kind of, being kind of outside of Los Angeles and outside of my family and all the mishigas that kind of I think I was, susceptible to and all that, I kind of started to find a voice a little bit, and I took sculpture classes, and I was welding, and I got a job at a foundry, and, I think I just kind of found my voice. I took a peace studies class, and I remember a book called Way of the Peaceful Warrior, and, just my world got rocked. And I started taking art classes, and I loved, hanging out and drinking vodka late at night and welding and painting and doing all that. And I think that I just kind of organically fell into this scene, where I was just with a bunch of kind of like weirdo hippie artists making stuff. And I think that, I got a lot of support and inspiration from teachers. There was a teacher there. He's still there. His name is Kurt Kemp, and he was a student of Lazansky, and he was really inspiring to me. And from there, I went to San Francisco Art Institute. They pushed me to keep pursuing the art, and at this point, I had no real plans. It was life was going better than it had ever been, and so I just kept doing it, and people kept seemed to keep being kind of like supporting me, and it was hitting something. I felt like I was kind of in the flow of life, and I remember I graduated from San Francisco, and it was like okay, like, what do we do now? And, a couple of my friends were getting shows in gallery, like the Paula England Gallery, and like things were